Good afternoon. Welcome to the 4th Annual Sabre Analytics Conference. I'm Mark Appelman, the Executive Director of Sabre. I think we got off to a great start this morning. We had 21 teams in the Diamond Dollar case competition, and once again, it was a great following, and Vince is going to tell us all the winners and everything in a little while. Just wanted to do a few housekeeping things. For the rest of the conference, we're going to be in this room. So basically till Sunday, you can just stay in this room. We're not going anywhere else except for the welcome reception this evening, which is at 7:30, and that's on the 3rd floor. It's a garden reception, so just take the elevator up to 3. In terms of questions for the panels this year, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to have cards in the back. There'll be pens and cards, and anybody who has a question, just write it out on the card, raise your hand, and we'll have somebody come by and pick it up, and then they'll be brought up to the moderator. So rather than doing the microphones and everything like that, we're going to do cards, which is, a little bit different. Also, this year, we are going to have 14 research presentations instead of 8, and everyone's going to be single-tracked. So we're hoping that will also add to the conference, in addition to all the top panels and panelists that we have. And once again, I just want to welcome you. It's great to see everyone, see a lot of familiar faces, but also a lot of new faces this year. And now I'm going to turn it over to the president of Sabre and the head of Diamond Dollars, Vince Gennaro.
It's great to see everyone again, and we do this every year, and we plan to keep doing it every year. This is our 4th, as I think you mostly know, because many of you have been here for several of them, but we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and spend some time and hear a little bit about what's going on in the world of baseball analytics. The whole purpose of this conference is to bring together some of the leading minds in the baseball analytics space to debate and discuss the way information and data is used to manage and lead and impact the game today. So again, we hope you enjoy the next couple of days. I'm going to do 2 things. The first of which is I am going to announce the winners of our case competition this morning. We had our 4th annual Diamond Dollars case competition. As Mark said, we had 21 student teams from 19 schools. We had 2 schools with 2 teams, and so it's our biggest one ever. I think last year we had 20, and we thought the judges thought the results were very impressive in terms of the information that was shared and the way that you young folks today, you students, are processing this complex information and data. Was very impressive. In fact, so impressive, it made it very difficult for the judges to really come up and pick a winner in each category. What we did was we identified the best team in each of 4 groups. We had 10 graduate school teams divided 5 in one room, 5 in another room. So we picked a best in each of the rooms and then one overall winner from the grad schools, and the same for the undergrads. The undergrads had 11, so they were 5 and 6. The grads had 10, so they were 5 and 5. I'm going to read off the winners, if you will, those who had the favorites of the judges in each of the 4 rooms, and then I will tell you who was the overall undergraduate and overall graduate school winners. So first, at the graduate level, the best in their group was Ryerson University, captained by Darcy Mulligan out of Toronto. We were thrilled to have them. And from the other graduate group, the best school was the home team, Arizona State University, and captained by Cody Callahan. On the undergraduate level, One of the groups that was the best of their 5 teams that they competed against was Stanford number 2, Captain Jordan Wallach. Congratulations, folks. And from the final room, I believe it was the room that had, in fact, 6 competitors, was the Tufts 2 team, captained by Caleb Pickenen. And I'll tell you, it was really tremendous work by all of you. There was to every team we could point out, the judges were pointing out in their discussion and deliberation all of the virtues and interesting things that came up. You know, I think we as executives in the business, in the industry, really get a lot out of the stimulation from the creative approaches and some of the rigorous math that gets applied through some of these students in the case competition. But now let me unveil the top 2 winning teams, and I'll ask you to stand in place when I call your name. We will be taking pictures later today, so probably at the end between now and the welcome reception. So hopefully you'll stay around. But when I do call your team name, please stand up if you will. So the undergraduate champs this year are the Stanford 2 team. Jordan Wallach. We've got Jordan Wallach, Vihan Lakshmin, Doe Park, Alec Powell, and Avner Krebs. Congratulations, guys. Terrific job. And the graduate school winning team is Arizona State University. Captained by Cody Callahan with Sean Aronson, Emerson Frostad, David Bocino, and Reed Smith. I also want to mention that Emerson knows the game not only at this level on paper and on the computer, but also on the field. He had a lengthy minor league career. I looked your stats up. I think you had 80 minor league home runs, right? I mean, that's pretty impressive. So here's a guy who played AAA baseball and now is on the verge of making the leap to the other side of the game with the kind of thought process that he and his teammates supplied today as part of the ASU team. But congratulations to all of the participants in the competition. So now we're ready to start with our program, and we're kicking it off, and I get the privilege of introducing someone who has become a real force in terms of helping me understand and translate what I know about the game to the public through the media. I don't think you could possibly overstate what Brian Kenny has done for analytics. I really put him up there in terms of being one of the real forces that has moved the ball forward through his work in the media, both at many years at ESPN and now more recently for the last several years at MLB Network. The approach that Brian has taken, even the shows that he has created, like Clubhouse Confidential and his newer show, MLB Now, are really platforms for people like the people in this room to come on with him and discuss and debate the game at perhaps a higher level. And I don't mean that in any condescending way, because there's a lot of great dialogue that goes on about the game today. But I do think, peeling that onion back 1 or 2 or 3 other layers, which Brian is so effective at, has had a great impact and really helped to spread the impact of analytics throughout the game. Baseball is clearly his passion. He knows the game as well as anyone that I know, and he's been a big part of this conference from the very beginning. So now here in our 4th year, I'd like to welcome Brian Kenny to the stage.
Well, Vince, that's nice of you to say. Good afternoon, everybody. I just start to say I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be asked to speak. I owe a great deal of gratitude to the Society of American Baseball Research. I always felt like I was a little late to the party, but I kept at it, and I found out, no, I'm still early as it goes on, as you may feel the same way, even with great progress that's been made over the last few years. Again, I have a lot of gratitude to Sabre, to so many people that are in this room that paved the way, the people who are doing the work in obscurity. I mean, we all kind of feel at a certain point, maybe some of you younger guys don't even feel this anymore, but you know, we always used to feel, we'd turn around and say, is anyone else seeing this? Is anyone else understanding this? And maybe we're past that point now. I think we're getting past that point. But for the people that were here, and the people that are here in the room, and the people especially that are going to be on the origins of sabermetrics tomorrow at 2:15, you think about it. John Walsh, who I used to work with at ESPN, is going to be here with John Thorne, Pete Palmer, John Dewan, Dick Kramer. I mean, these are the legends of baseball. For me, these guys are at a level of Henry Chadwick. These guys are Hall of Famers. These guys have done so much to change the way we think about baseball. I don't think enough respect is being paid to these giants of the game. Obviously, Bill James, you hear me speak about him just about on every single MLB Now. People say, what, do you have a photo of him in your office? Yes, I do. Yes, these people who are the giants of the game, let's give them a round of applause and gratitude. And to Vince and Mark, thank you for asking me to be here and asking me to be a part of things and putting together such a great conference. This doesn't have to be, and yet here it is, and so many ideas get bounced around all the time. You know, I was at the MIT Analytics Conference a few weeks back, and I got the chance to do a one-on-one interview with the new commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred. And in the middle of all the things that we were talking about, I just asked him point blank, and I didn't know what his answer would be. I just asked him, what role has sabermetrics played in baseball? And he shot back right away. It's revolutionized the game. It's changed the way we think about the game. I mean, and the way he said it made me really think, wow, here is a commissioner now. Here is a man who's running baseball who clearly gets it, because also he's working with MLB Advanced Media. They're looking at the StatCast that's going to, again, further revolutionize the game. All these new things are out there. They're not even sure of what it's exactly going to look like or bring or how we're going to study it, but they do know, and he said at the conference 2 weeks ago, you should be aware, he did say that we want the fans to have access to it. Well, this is very different, isn't it? It's very different from decades ago where the statistics were kept in a corner somewhere. Now, no, you want this out there like radio broadcasts were decades ago. Oh, we can't give this away for free. No, you want to give it away for free. You want everyone to get more and more interested in this fabulous game. We're only more and more fascinated by the game of baseball. So just the way Rob Manfred immediately shot back, it's revolutionized the game, just really gave me a good feeling about, wow, he recognizes what has happened. He's seeing what has happened on the field over the last few years, and this is a good thing as more and more people embrace it, especially officially and at the highest levels. The game, though, is moving fast. I know I wasn't here last year. I was here 2 years ago, and I remember I was speaking to someone who was with baseball ops for a major league team, and he was going through all his ideas, one after another, of what he thought the club should be doing, and I thought, these are great ideas. You're not really doing them. And he said, I asked him, I said, why is that? And he said, well, that's not the way it's done. And I'm thinking, well, how is that possible? The guy in baseball ops was Bill James. Yeah, not some baseball ops kid. It was Bill himself saying, well, what you think and what you want to do, what gets to the field, it doesn't quite work that way. And that felt like a theme all throughout. At this conference, there's so many bright minds, sharp thinkers, everyone has an understanding of baseball at a deep level. And, you know, what I came away with was the best ideas are not getting to the field. That was 2 years ago. I don't know if we can say that now. I think I see it more and more and more, these ideas getting to the field. Front offices have advanced greatly. High-level thinkers challenging the orthodoxy, the smart young kids, the ones you see in this room, the whole assistant GM class, very smart people getting after it. Now, how do those ideas get out onto the field to the team itself? You know, 2 years ago I asked the following question, and I was on a panel, I think it was with Bill James, Rob Nyer, and Vince. And I asked the question, remember, I said, 5 years from now, did I say 5 years? 5 years from now, do the Astros win 90 games? And I think I put that time frame on it. And at the time, everybody laughed. Like the crowd, even this crowd, laughed. Astros winning 90 games. And I believe, Vince, everybody on the panel said yes. And Bill James said 95. And the reason was, I thought, that here's a team that has nothing blocking their ideas. Finally, a team. Now, some teams have done a fabulous job, player development, with their scouting, with really thinking things through. The Cardinals, for example, obviously this is the team with a lot of methodology, a team that's very smart in a baseball sense and an analytics sense, but is everything getting out onto the field? It's difficult. So I asked the question because if most every other club was having trouble getting their best ideas, whatever they were, and they're not always the same things, the best ideas aren't the same things on every team. But if they're not getting through, could a team with no such encumbrance have a big advantage? And I think we all believe that. If the Astros don't have that, they have an advantage. But in 2 years, only 2 years, we're in a transformation. One club after another seems to be turning the corner, right? The A's are winning. The Rays have been at the forefront for years. Then the Yankees started outshifting the Rays. The Orioles are outshifting the Yankees. Hold on a second. People are getting it. It goes on. And then on top of this, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates. And wait a second, hold on. They're doing something different because they're not spending any money. And they seem to be doing it, quote unquote, the right way and yet the smart way. So here's a team that has been terrible for a long time, putting it all together. I think, and you might disagree with me, I think the A's and the Rays could have been doing their own thing on their own for years and years and everybody would have left alone. As long as they didn't start reeling off several World Series titles in a row, as long as they got to the playoffs and lost somewhere along the way, it could be explained away. They could have their own mad scientist lab and do their own thing and they'd be fine. The Red Sox obviously went heavy on analytics, but they had Manny and Pedro. The Yankees have a big analytics staff. Some of you are probably here. They don't talk about it. The Giants win all the time. They have a big analytics staff. They're thinking all the time. They don't talk about it. You can explain it away. The big boys, they kind of keep it under wraps. No, we don't really want to talk to you. I know I'll have conversations with a lot of you here that are in baseball operations, and I'll say, hey, can we do a quick interview? Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, I can't do that. So you kind of keep it on the down low. I think that's changing now. The Pirates were bad for a long time. I mean, we saw them scratching and clawing for 2 years. They fall back. Then what do? I mean, things just too obvious to ignore. And probably everybody in this room knows what they're doing. Getting the ground ball pitchers, getting the defense, getting the shifting, getting even pitchers who don't throw ground balls to throw different pitches to get more ground balls and keep shifting and increase shifting by 400%. And then it gets smarter and smarter. They start reclaiming lost pitchers on a regular basis. They rarely go to the free agent market, but where do they spend what we thought was top dollar at the time? On a guy who does pitch framing, Russell Martin. So hold on a second. They seem to be doing everything. They're outspending teams for years on the international market before it finally got capped. They're doing everything they could and did it from top to bottom as an organization. Now they make the playoffs back-to-back years, and I think it hits the rest of the league at a different level. These guys not spending any money, got a manager who was an ex-player, looks like a good old boy, but he's born-again intelligentsia. Clint Hurdle is, my favorite thing about Clint Hurdle and all his coaches, because we talk to him a lot when we do MLB Now, most managers over the last decade, anytime you brought up analytics or you brought up the Sabre metrics, they'd say, oh, sure, we like to look at everything, but we have scouts and we believe in the old-fashioned grit and hard work. And yeah, I know, I get it. But what else are you doing? And Clint and his staff said, no, we finally got to the point where we started listening to all our smart people. And we started having conversations and getting the best ideas out onto the field. They say it openly. Been waiting for the Pirates for 20 years. The rest of the baseball sees that, and I think there's no stopping it. I think we've reached a tipping point in that case. Teams that have built a culture of sabermetric, buying in at all levels of sabermetrics and baseball will have the advantage. It's never one answer because it's never one question, but things are changing. And only 2 years have passed since that's happened. So my number one takeaway from this place 2 years ago, ideas not getting onto the field. Ideas are now getting right onto the field. And for some clubs, quickly, efficiently, and it leads directly to winning. I'll give you an example of a tipping point in another sport. Anybody watch World Soccer? Everybody likes soccer? Some people like soccer or international soccer? A little bit. It's fascinating what's happened over the last decade or two. It used to be, if you remember, like each country had a national style. a certain style of play. Brazil used to dribble, kind of the emphasis on the virtuoso, on the individual talent. Italy was known for its signature defense, otherwise didn't work all that hard. Germany worked very hard, were very good in the air. I realize these are gross generalities, right? But I'm talking about the soccer teams. England played the long game, long passes, they'd chase it down. Spain had short passing, what they call tiki-taka. The ball would go quick, and you bring it up the field. The Netherlands played total football, if you remember that. That was in the 70s, immersed in tactics. I think the Dutch were the early sabermetricians of soccer. They were doing things tactically. They were paying attention. They were thinking. They didn't play with the same type of passion, but they were always thinking of tactically how to beat you. So what happened? The world gets smaller, more connected, less isolated. Teams playing in Europe are all very close geographically. They're all seeing what each other is doing. More money comes into club play, more tournaments. The Premier League has the best athletes in the world. They can bring in a concentration of the world's best. More club play, more tournaments, more cross-pollination. Coaches that have had success jump from one club to another, teaching their way. The country didn't matter as much anymore. The tactics did. The coaching did. Europe became a cauldron forging a new football. A new style was emerging in soccer. If you wanted to win, you had to play along. Playing along meant think like the Dutch, work like the Germans, pass like the Spanish, play defense like Italians. That's world soccer. That's how you win. It didn't all have to come together, just like in baseball. Everyone could have been doing their own thing, but you reach a point where everything starts to come together, and you realize that even with some cultural traits that still are for each country, by and large, there is a way to play. And the teams that play continental European football, short passes, quick work, constant movement, total football, eventually it became evident. If you wanted to win, you had to play this style. Hasn't happened in baseball internationally, right? Japan, not quite big enough. Cuba, not quite big enough. We've had such an advantage. We got started early. We invented the game. It evolved here. We had all the athletes. We have an economic advantage. We have all these things, but we've never been forced by another country. Even in World Baseball Classic with Cuba and Japan playing very well, we always take our losses in stride. It doesn't matter. It's being played in March. It doesn't hurt us the way it does in international basketball. Have you noticed that? We're not stung by it, so we don't feel like, hey, in Japan they play a pitcher once a week. Maybe we should do that. Yu Darvish brought that up last year. It didn't get anywhere right away. Maybe we'll start to think about that. Maybe there's different ways of doing it internationally. Cuba will bring in a relief pitcher in the second inning, like Bruce Bochy in a Game 7, but right away in any tournament game, and they'll play tournament baseball. You know, in the book Soccernomics, has anybody read Soccernomics? Outstanding book. It's a few years old at this point. You know this. There's a coach, Gus Hiddink, former Dutch player and coach, kind of the Billy Bean of European soccer. He became the prime exporter of this new knowledge. He went from the Dutch national team to Korea, and then Australia, Russia. He's been all around the world, bringing brain power to different countries. Now, Korea, if you remember, the host nation of the World Cup in 2002, they had a lot of pressure, had a lot of national pride on the line. They brought in Gus Hiddink, figuring we got to try something new. We're just not good enough. There he found a culture of traditionalism, an atmosphere of results over process. Does that sound familiar? Is baseball kind of going back a little bit? I'll give you an example. Prior to Hiddink, if Korea lost a game by a wide margin, like 5-0, coach was expected to put in his resignation. He had to quit because he brought shame to the country. Didn't matter how well they were doing, what their process was, if they're making progress. Maybe you played Germany, maybe you played a big shot, you just weren't going to beat them anyway. Didn't matter. You lost big, you had to quit, you had to tender your resignation. Hiddink came in and saw instantly what was wrong. He was looking for the most skilled players. He was putting his roster together. He was told right away, oh no, that's not how it's done. What mattered in Korea was social standing, what school you went to, what class you came from, what family you came from. Hiddink found that status counted for way too much within the team. The younger players were afraid of the older players. They wouldn't challenge them. They wouldn't sit down to lunch with them in the lunchroom. And they certainly wouldn't challenge them on the field or ask them, hey, you got to get back, or you got to move up, or they kept quiet. It's an unhealthy thing that they had, too much status. So you didn't have the best players. Players didn't flow well on the field. They felt immense pressure. Any loss brought them national shame. So Hiddink did a bunch of things. He named one of the younger players captain. He cut loose a lot of the older players who wouldn't get on board. And while he was coaching, he just backed off. Didn't criticize them, didn't get on top of them. Players, he said, were afraid to make mistakes. They feared the discipline. They feared the shame of losing. They made them uptight. He wanted to give them autonomy on the field to think for themselves. Along the way to the World Cup, by the way, what happened? Korea lost 5-0 twice. And of course, that would have been, boom, you got to fire this guy. But Hiddink didn't think that. He said, no, I'm believing in this process. Fortunately, he had enough backing. He didn't get fired. So change is difficult within the culture. Think about this. Had Hiddink been from Korea, had he been from within the culture, he would have never been able to do the things that he did. He wouldn't have been able to cut the traditional ties of social standing, putting together a team by class and family lines, and he would have been fired after losing one of those games. The Koreans, a very insular culture, decided to go outside for new ideas, feeling they needed to do it to compete, and they stayed the course. They trusted the process. Do you know what happened to Korea in the 2002 World Cup? Because they had never made the second round before. They made the second round, made the quarterfinals, they made the semifinals. They got jobbed in the semifinals too, if you saw that game. He was a national hero. They also made him an honorary Korean, which is huge in that country. They just don't do that. They thought, no, you're one of us now. Hiddink had new ideas. He had a different way of playing. He adapted it to the players that he had and the nation. He had respect for the nation that he had and the culture. But there were certain things that had to change. And they say, in many different scholarly papers, that it led to a transformation within the thought process within the country of, hey, merit counts. Talent counts. It's not just your social standing. It matters what you can do and how you think and your talent and your work. It reverberated throughout the entire culture, just from the soccer team. It's amazing. A veteran GM told me recently, change is very emotionally difficult in baseball. You know, we're tied to the way we were taught. It's learned one way, it's passed down to the next generation. After a while, we don't even know why we're doing it. This happened in baseball, certainly. In soccer, the questioning began over the last quarter century. It takes a lot to break through the cultural traditions. It takes an awful lot. We're kind of stuck in that process. We have powerful forces in our own heads that don't allow us to move forward. We have to constantly question, and sometimes we have to be forced. We've seen it in soccer, we're seeing it in baseball, and we're seeing it tremendously in the last 2 years in baseball. Off-season, I mean, this is fascinating. This is one of the greatest off-seasons I've ever seen. Think about it. Billy Beane is tearing it down and building it up. John Hart, one of the top executives of the last generation, back in business, and he's not sitting around. Tony La Russa, who's going to be here as new GM, Dave Stewart, they made big moves. They're in big on the Cuban players. A.J. Preller gets his first chance, builds a new team in 2 weeks. We love this. You're getting after it. Get after it a little bit. The Dodgers, maybe they see the next market inefficiency, pay some executive talent. Tampa Bay, they know what they're doing. The A's know what they're doing. Let's bring these guys in. Teams are thinking and acting. Now again, maybe the Dutch were like the sabermetricians, the thinkers. Johan Cruyff was the all-time great Dutch player. He went to Barcelona as the manager, developed that ticky-tack style of passing the ball up and down. It's still being played and they're still dominating. So it's not that the Dutch took over world football. The ideas spurred something new. And I think teams are thinking, teams are acting. It's not just sabermetrics, but it's everything coming together. I think you've seen now, because again, the old school, new school thing, I've been through it. It's tired. I get it. I'm tired of it too. And on MLB Now, I hope you've noticed this. When we do our shows now, our producer, Micah Karg, is right there. And we talk about it after just about every show, where we don't take for granted that we'll have on a show Ken Rosenthal, Ron Darling, Vince Gennaro, or Rob Nyer, John Smoltz, George Will. It could be, any mix. And we're all just talking baseball. And it didn't used to be the model on TV. Again, I've been doing that for years. It used to be you would have, John Walsh is here, and the early model was, you would have, a host, then you'd have a ball player, and then, whoa, Peter Gammons, a sports writer just sitting there talking baseball. Kind of forged things ahead. Moved everything ahead. Like, wait a second. Oh, yeah, now you should have that. Now we have it where we have a sports writer. Well, you want a player. We have players all throughout MLB tonight, MLB Network, because we are going to games live. You need to understand the craft of the game. The players understand the craft. As I've told Harold Reynolds when we were trying to figure out why do we disagree on baseball when we agree on everything else. We can go out to dinner, we can hang out, we can talk kids, talk everything, but we're always butting heads on baseball. And, I said to Harold, I said, you're like a tree surgeon. You see things on the tree I will never see. I don't understand that. You'll see things on the bark. You'll see a catcher moving to the outside. You'll see signals I won't see. I think in this room, we step way back and we see the whole forest. But there's value, of course, in both. And we're seeing that value. Educators will say it's like calling someone, instead of calling them out, call them in. I learned something this offseason at the LGBTQ Task Force Conference in February. That's lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer. I was there with Billy Beane of Major League Baseball. He's the new ambassador for inclusion. Former player, came out as gay after he retired, and now he's back in helping educate players and organizations on being inclusive and educating the players. And so far, it's been a tremendous success. There's little things here and there. We've seen them in the news, but it's been a tremendous success. And at that task force, they were talking about what should you do when you want to be an ally, right? You just want to be a decent, thinking, tolerant person, and someone says something that's just offensive and demeaning. What do you say? And you think immediately, call them out. Call them out on it. And they were saying, no, call them in. Ask them, why do you think that way? What makes you think that way? Have you thought about how that affects the other person, their feelings? Have you thought it through? Give them a chance. Maybe they haven't thought it through all the way. I mean, it's not an exact analogy for a baseball argument if we're having, but it is thinking it through, where it's like, hey, call them in. Don't call them out, because we're morphing closer and closer together. Some of the best conversations that we have, anyway, when we do MLB Now, we bring in, an infield coach, third base coach. They're studying things. They're looking at things. They're seeing more and more information. Everything is coming together, and everybody's getting on board. I mean, even just this week, Mike, I don't think it was you, but one of our producers, you're always baiting me with these things. They say, hey, did you see what Ian Kinsler said? And it was, I'll go with my eyes over the numbers. And, you see that all the time. Then I'm thinking, okay, well, what is he talking about? And I don't even want to click on it. I don't even want to find out. But it depends on what he's talking about. What if a pitcher is tired? Would you trust the pitch count, or would you trust your eyes, an educated eye, if his mechanics were breaking down? Trust your eyes. Your eyes will be better at finding if the player is fatigued. So I don't think there's one way. I think there's eventually a best way. So even with Ken Rosenthal, who's going to be here. Is Ken here? Oh, I wish Ken was here. If Ken's going to be here, or John Heyman, the John Heymans of the world, as they call them, calling them in. Everybody has something to offer, and I think we're at that place now. We haven't been at that place before. We're getting at that place now. It's a new era of analytics. I think the old guard has seen the light. I don't even think it needs to be called that. I still call it sabermetrics out of respect for those who, surged along year after year. But it's really not as much, is it sabermetrics? Is it analytics? Is it scouting? It's thinking. It's thinking in baseball. And we're seeing it more and more. We're getting into a golden age. There's more ways to approach it, and it's exploding. We're about to see it happen again with the StatCast. What do we do with all this new information? What is it telling us? It's telling us big data is exploding. It's telling us more. And yet, even while, I'll give you an example, we were talking about at MLB Advanced Media. Did you see the Yasiel Puig play against the Mets, where he was roaming back and he just sprinted way back and he made the catch? And we did the StatCast on it, how far he had to travel, how far he had to throw, his acceleration getting there. And all of that is important. We can rank it, we can file it. But you know what? It was a beautiful catch. And that's it. It was like yeah, he made it a little tougher than he had to, but man, he made an unbelievable catch on the run, stopped on a dime and fired it back in to try to get a double play. It was just beautiful. And I think we're getting to that level of understanding. So for the people that had all of this, on their minds for all these decades, see Dick right here, and I see you guys here, and I just want to show the proper respect for what you've gone through for years. John Thorne is here, and Pete Palmer is here, and writing Hidden Game of Baseball. I can only imagine what you were thinking in 1985 when you had all this in a book and saying, wow, nobody's quite listening to this. Took all this time to get here. So again, thank you so much. In a few minutes, I think we're going to take 5 minutes. We'll have a few minutes. We're going to have Kurt Schilling up here with John Kruk, Doug Glanville coming up. Again, the funny thing about, I used to do baseball tonights and sports centers with John Kruk, and he used to say, I'm not crazy about all this new stuff. And I'd say, John, if these whippersnappers were in the front offices when you were playing, your money's doubling, man. I said, John, you had a 430 on base. It's like, oh, I didn't hit many home runs. Well, it's okay. You're hitting 30 doubles. You're fine. I mean, it's not, most of the players that you find were kind of, I'm not sure about this stuff. No. You're the type of player that would benefit from this, including, of course, Curt Schilling, who should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we're going to have players up here, and we'll have the conversation. But again, thank you so much, and welcome to the conference.